Our next speaker is Kristina Mehring. She is the co-founder and project manager of the Estonian animal advocacy organization Lomus, which started in spring 2014. She has been involved in animal activism since 2006. Now Kristina will present some findings of her research project in sociology, for which interviews with slaughterhouse workers were done in order to understand their concepts of their work in relation to animals. Please welcome Kristina Mehring.
Hello everyone. Nice to see so many people here. So my talk is about attitudes of slaughterhouse workers towards animals and their work. I pretty much represent sort of like my organization and also Tallinn University here, so I am like conflicting here. About the background of the research, I would like to really emphasize that it was a preliminary paper, so I can't bring you huge results that can be that can apply to the whole society and to the whole to each and every slaughterhouse worker. But I can bring you a sort of a case study of the biggest slaughterhouse in Estonia, and the study was part of a subject called research seminar. And it was part of my bachelor's degree in sociology. Why I asked about if there are any students of sociology here, then I would have maybe involved them also, because I think that this field of human-animal studies is something that each and every activist has something to learn from, because this is sort of our body in the academic field, I can say in that sense. And it's an academic field of study. It is multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, which means that it involves very many different academic disciplines, which include sociology, anthropology, history, psychology, but it also takes the knowledge of ethologists, zoologists, and primatologists on which like, for example, if ethologists or zoologists find out something really new and interesting about the animal consciousness or about the animal mind, then the human-animal studies in different disciplines, for example, sociologists can use the information that they get from zoologists. So these are all interconnected in that sense. Okay, I am a student of sociology, but there are very many different fields. And for example, even historians have discovered that we can, for example, write an analytical paper, for example, how animals have been used in labor, or there are very many different topics. Of course, it's a rather new discipline. You can say that it has evolved together with the animal rights movement, that when, for example, the breaking point of Peter Singer's book was definitely one of the key points of this academic discipline to evolve. And many universities have courses on human-animal studies, and even departments dedicated to the research of human-animal relations. Of course, we don't have yet that in Tallinn. If you heard the presentation of Kadri Aavik yesterday, then we are both from Tallinn University, but sadly the human-animal studies or critical animal studies is a bit underrepresented in Tallinn University. Yes. And I have a quote here from Margo de Mello, who has written a study book about human-animals studies. You can say that it's a really good book. It's an introduction to anyone who is interested how this relationship between human and animals is researched on an academic level. And she says that human-animal studies is an interdisciplinary field that explores the spaces that animals occupy in human social and cultural worlds and the interactions humans have with them. So basically this means all the fields that we as activists address from the level that these are the sort of crooked power relations that need to be addressed. So these are addressed from the academic level. So we have very many similar topics. Okay, and back to my research, that why slaughterhouse workers? Since this field is a very broad one, I could, principally I could choose whatever, people who work in zoos or in fur farms or whatever, but I chose slaughterhouse workers, obviously because they have a very direct contact with animals as a part of their everyday work. I didn't want to choose just ordinary meat-eating people to somehow analyze how they conceptualize their eating habits. I wanted to take something more specific and something more, the next point is a bit something more extreme, an extreme example of work. And before I began this research, it seemed to me that the attitudes of butchers and slaughterhouse workers, their attitudes towards animals seemed like probably appealing material for analyze. And obviously, the way that they analyze the human-animal relationship from their very specific line of work is can be put to a wider context in the way that we as a humankind in general see the human-animal relationship. And my question is basically that how do some guys like this end up as being like this? And what does it take for those workers who are involved with it? The topics that I analyzed during this research project were the slaughterhouse workers' attitude towards their pay, their working conditions, towards killing and the violent nature of the work, towards the stereotype of the butcher, of a butcher, and their attitude towards animals. And the theoretical background of the research, well, this is the boring part probably, is obviously the human-animal studies, which I already explained. Also the sociology of the slaughterhouse, which is a term coined by an American philosopher, Richard York, which means that it is a sociological interest towards the mechanism of the mind which interpret and justify the violent nature of the slaughterhouse. And the sociology of the slaughterhouse is a part of human-animal studies, and human-animal studies presupposes that animals are a part of our society just as we humans are. And that means that this one field, sociology of the slaughterhouse, investigates how this context of a slaughterhouse works for both parts, for the people who are working there and for the consumers who buy the final product, and also for the animals who are also involved in the slaughterhouse. Yeah. Then also I used the theory of shifting sensibilities by Amy Fitzgerald. She says that basically before the 18th century, people lived together with the animals that they consumed. They basically, well, most of the people were either a part of the killing process or were very much aware where their food was coming from. The living conditions and the rural part of our lives was like of a much more importance than compared to nowadays, when I really liked how was it today or yesterday, Siobhan, who was doing a presentation, said that I have been in Luxembourg for 3 days and I haven't seen any animals. And she also said that I can live in Australia for 10 years and I might not see any animals. But the only way that people see them in nowadays societies is, as I showed the picture, in a package. That's the biggest contact between human and animals today, next to keeping pets. So that's what Amy Fitzgerald considers as shifting sensibilities, in that sense that we don't have the sensibility towards agricultural animals because we don't have a direct contact with them. But on the same time, nowadays, most of us enjoy the company of pets, which means that there is also a conflict between having some animals having the right not to be killed and some having it not. I also used the theory of domesticity and post-domesticity by historian Richard Boulier, who also touches this topic that during domesticity, when people were in the process of domesticating animals, they were in a very direct contact with them. And now, during post-domesticity, the contact is pretty much low or non-existent, and therefore we only see the final product. Okay, and this is also something that most people don't see on an everyday basis, but what is the everyday reality for the pigs and for the slaughterhouse workers? This is a modern slaughterhouse. Oh, a really interesting fact, I don't know if you noticed, probably you did. This Kulturfabrik used to be a slaughterhouse. Like, when I heard it, there are pictures on the walls as well. When you go to the room where the stalls are, you can see the mechanisms where the pigs were hanging. You can see them under the wall. So I really like the idea which someone says that it used to be a slaughterhouse, but now there's an animal rights conference here. So, yes. Okay, for this research, I did interviews and an observation during the killing line. The opinions in the interviews, which I did with slaughterhouse workers and butchers, mostly overlapped in the topics which I mentioned before, but they had some exceptions. When I asked about the stereotype of a butcher, like from them, what do you think is the stereotype of the butcher in the society? It's like the general opinions about butchers, perceived by butchers about butchers. They also replied that they are thought mostly as bullies, criminals, principally evil people. And one of the interviewees also said that when there should be a conflict, and it is known that one of the people works at a slaughterhouse, then most probably he will end the conflict with a knife. That's what he thought, that is thought of him. But they all emphasized that none of their co-workers are like that, and it's completely a stereotype and a myth, and so on. Although when I did some research beforehand, before doing the interviews, I found out that there have been definitely one instance in Estonia when a person working in a slaughterhouse killed his entire family. So there have been some bad cases as well. It is usually perceived that it is a very dirty job, they also said. That people think that we are standing in feces up to our hips and the rest of the body is covered in blood. But actually there are very many different types of slaughterhouses nowadays. The more modern they get, the more machine-based they get. They also emphasized a lot that they have these like white rubber aprons and rubber boots, which are also white. And these are like washable. During the end of each day, they wash these with a shower. But they also said, like very proudly, that under these, like this white cover outfit, they can even wear light-colored clothes. So it's not a very dirty job. Yes. I also asked about questions that do they see this work as their calling in life, as what they in their soul and in their heart really want to do, but none of them saw it in that way. They all had mostly coincidental stories how they ended up working there. It was like for example, when the Soviet Union ended and Estonia was regaining independence, then they had a choice, where one person had a choice whether to go work in a hospital, in a factory of cement or in a slaughterhouse. And he decided, since he had previous experience with animals, to go and see what a slaughterhouse is all about. When I was preparing for the interviews, I had one block of questions which touched the training to become a butcher or to become a slaughterhouse worker, which I had to basically remove the moment I touched the topic, because when I did research for it, I understood that there are very many specific skills which are necessary to become a slaughterhouse worker, but the reality is that they only get the training in hygienics, and no previous training whatsoever is required, and people from the street can come and work at a slaughterhouse. And they told me how the process goes, that someone applies, which is rather rarely because people don't usually want to work there. Then the manager of the personnel takes them to some room where they are shown a video how the killing line works. And since a lot of the people who are even applying get sick from seeing it, they decide they don't want to work there. And so this is their process of finding out who are the true butchers. Yes. And worker turnover is very high, and I have the United States statistics here. In some houses per year it's even 100%, which means that, for example, on the 1st of January 2013, there are these 40 people working there, but next year on the 1st of January, none of the workers might be there because the work is very hard. Yes. And I also want to talk a bit about the peculiarity of my sample for the interviewees. The thing is that all of the interviewees had worked in a slaughterhouse more than 20 years, which makes them, I don't know, very makes them very persistent, I guess is the right word. And since I didn't have the possibility to choose the sample freely, since I was guided by the director of the slaughterhouse, basically he was part of making the sample because he chose the workers for me. And he also explained it to me a bit in that sense that, yes, we have had here some workers who come, stay a few weeks, and then they start saying weird things, and I don't want you to do interviews with them. Yes, okay. So in that sense, this sample is a bit, it has its specifics. As I mentioned before, slaughterhouses are becoming more and more machine-based, and thanks to that, the work rate has also increased. And in that slaughterhouse, around 3 pigs per minute are killed, which means that around 220 in an hour and around 1,700 pigs per day. There is also a killing line for cows there, but I didn't visit it that day. A good reason, obviously, why the economic crisis is a good thing for the animals, because when there was an economic boost in Estonia, both of the killing lines, 4 cows and 4 pigs, were working 7 days a week all the time, like when there was economic growth. But when we had a decline in the economy, the killing lines were working 3 days a week for the pigs and 2 days a week for the cows, because they were killing less and less animals. So during that day, when I had the observation of the killing line, the cow killing line was not working, and only they were killing pigs. Yes, I'm sorry. This is. I hope you understand that I'm not trying to justify it. I went there just to research the topic. Also about the working conditions of the slaughterhouse workers. Of course, what are their problems of the work, which is very, very intensified, is constant repetitive movements, since the killing line is 21 different positions, all doing different tasks to disassemble the body of the pig. They are having blisters all the time because they keep the knives in the special position. Heat and cold, depending on the room which they are working in. In the main line, it is very, very hot and moist there, but in the next lines, they need to keep the temperature very, very low, because otherwise the parts of the animals would, they need to be in a cold temperature. Also, they need to be in rubber boots for the very long working hours, and so on and so on. So for those persons working there, there is nothing pretty much happy about it. And they all said that the pay is not sufficient for that kind of work. In the interviews, it was really interesting to see how they emphasized, well, obviously in Estonian, but that kind of work, yes. This is not the slaughterhouse which I visited, but you can see the rubber apron here. And also an interesting fact, in Estonia they use different kind of knives as well, but the specific of this person, one of the 21 workers who is called the stabber, he needs to be like a real professional stabber in that sense that if he doesn't hit the animal straight here in the middle of the neck, then the animal might stay alive, and all the other line workers might have to deal with a half-alive animal. So, although the animals are, they go to a gas chamber before, but they said that some of the time the gas chamber doesn't really work with all the animals. Oh, and to maybe illustrate the fact that there are very many, like very different slaughterhouses, then this is the one picture I found from Cambodia, I think this is pronounced that way. This is really not machine-based at all. And to think of, okay, we here are about the animals, but what might the workers, in that sense, might feel here, then the conditions are radically different and it's really hard to come to universal conclusions about this sort of phenomena. Yes, and now to attitudes towards animals. When I asked them about the necessity of the slaughterhouse as such in our society, then they all obviously thought that it is a very necessary phenomena. But their basic arguments were, it has always been like this or this way, and otherwise we would have to eat grass and flowers. They specified that dandelions for some reason, yes. And they all thought that they absolutely strongly thought that it's a necessary position, the slaughterhouse worker or the butcher, and it brings benefits to the society where absolutely everyone eats meat. Like you can generalize it in that way. And these arguments build together a very strong mechanism in their mind, and they work as a support base for them to get over for example, the unpleasant stab which the stabber does, or the unpleasant cut which does another worker of the line, which, for example, cuts away some other part of the animal. And it was absolutely clear that a mechanism of thought is required to overcome the uncomfortable feeling. Although I was dealing with workers who had been there for more than 20 years, it was still a topic. It was obvious that the workers who had been there for longer, they had better sort of tricks of the mind of how to stay calm and how to get through the day, but they all needed something. And absolutely, these are the people who when we talk about the general audience, we can bring as an argument that they might not know what happens to the animals, and we must show them the images and so on and so on. But these are the people who know, and their main mechanism is to block it completely because they can't do their everyday job otherwise. And they need to distract the thoughts, and they need to build a routine. And yes. And absolutely killing animals for food is perceived as something normal and ordinary for them as well. And I was also thinking that when I was doing the interviews, they were like constantly repeating the fact that absolutely that it's normal and ordinary, and they can't think of like such things of the questions that I asked, for example. But I was even thinking that maybe the situation of the interview itself, it was in the middle of their work day, and they had to go back to work. It was like during their lunch break or something. And I was wondering that they had to think of those things during the interview. And I'm really sad that I haven't like reached back to those people. I'm not even sure if it's possible anymore. But like, how did they get through the rest of the day then? In their sense, that like in their understanding. Oh, and one of the arguments used was also that if you like do written work as a student of sociology, then I kill pigs. That is how they normalize this concept of their work and even the violent nature of it. Yes, and it was also mentioned as one of the answers that this stabber is the one who takes the life of an animal, but that is something they can't think about. They can't think about. And the quote here is that if we would think about it, then it would be the wrong place to work. So you understand here, they have thought about it during their long work here in the slaughterhouse. Yeah, here, which used to be a slaughterhouse. But they have built these huge blockades in their mind. So they need to block it in order to get through the day, the week, the month, the year, and to continue their work. Yes, and the key, when I started this research, I wanted to analyze the mechanisms of which the norm that killing animals for food is, how this norm is built, and what do they think in order to build it. But I understood that the important thing is that what do they block, that what do they willingly leave unthought, and also what helps them to achieve this routine or to stay. Okay, thanks. To keep the minds away is that they are listening to music or the radio from the earphones, also during the stabbing process, and all the 21 line workers can use it if it helps them. And they also said that a pig comes, I stab it. Another one comes, I stab it, and that's the routine. There is like they don't like try to critically analyze the sentence or the situation in that sense that a living creature is coming, I am in the position with the knife, that, like they cannot do it. Okay, and here I come to a very, very big exception, which let's see what you make of it. Here is a nice picture of a calf, a baby cow. As I mentioned, this is a slaughterhouse which kills pigs and cows, but they don't on a daily basis deal with calves. But there are some exceptions. For example, when there is a case that somewhere in Estonia, for example, a barn burns down and there have been calves in it, and someone contacts the slaughterhouse director that, hey, can we bring the calves there? We have nothing to do with them. Can you kill them? The workers who had been working there for more than 20 years, as I mentioned, said that this has happened maybe a few times during that time. And as I understand, on 2 of these cases, all the butchers there who had been working for 15 years, maybe 10 years by that time, they were unable to perform the killing of the calves. When they were telling it to me in the interviews, I thought, am I hearing wrong? Or I asked very many, like, could you explain it more, and blah, blah, like, and so on. And none of the block mechanisms work. And one of the reasons probably was that, as you all know, cows cry, baby cows cry even more. And they like explain to me how these little like sentient beings are there with their huge eyes, and they cry, and they explain to me how they are so aware of what's going on, and calves are something different, something special, and I am unable to make my heart cold to them. And 2 of from these occasions, on 2 times, the calves were sent away. And I asked what happened to them, or do you know, they probably, it's the most likely scenario that they ended up in some other slaughterhouse. But the situation was that very experienced butchers looked into the eyes of these calves who were crying, and they said that I cannot kill them. Make of that what you will. Yes. And since this seemed such an interesting material, that what's going on in the minds of these people they are trained and they are very experienced into doing that stab. So I spontaneously constructed a situation where the butcher would be riding on a village road on his bicycle, and next to the village road, no houses are around, lies a baby calf who has been hit by a car and who is in near-death agony. Next to the baby calf is a pile of rocks. And the butcher sees the situation, only him is around, no one else. Would the butcher be able to end the animal's miseries? Like, just a theoretical situation. And then, I really, really liked one of the replies, where, he was thinking and asking, and, is there no one around? And, no one is around, only these rocks. What about, a wooden stick? No. And, really, really, he was in trouble with the situation, really in a conflict with himself. And eventually he said that, and he even asked that, I don't have my butcher knife with me, no. And he said that if there is only this situation, he has nothing, only but he would be, have this rock and he could, hit the cow to end its miseries. He said he would be unable to do it. So I guess it's really good learning material in that sense, that we all know that baby animals are really cute, and it is possible to use them for good campaigns and so on, but maybe we should use them even more if even butchers have a soft spot for them. Yes, and also interesting is all of them agreed that animals have a soul, all of the interviewees, but there came a very interesting division between, it seemed to me when they were talking about animals, they were meaning pets, and they weren't really, it seemed to me that all the time they started to talk about, yes, they have a soul, and I asked that, what does that mean to you, or can you explain it, or how does it express in life that they have a soul? They started to talk about their pets. They always started to talk about their pets. Not about the pigs or the cows or not even the calves, which were important, but they always started to talk about their pets. There's a quote here that, my cat at home means a lot more to me now since I began working as a butcher. I see the lifeless bodies of animals all day. My cat is also an animal. Okay, here we see that also, but at least he lives. Yes. And they also mentioned that it is a thing that they can't broaden up as a concept, the fact that they think that animals have souls, because it would make their job a lot more difficult. Yes. Okay, and as I mentioned, I also did an observation of the killing line, which was also together with the director of the Slaughterhouse. I still have blood on my boots from that experience, but it was to gain knowledge of what we're up against. So I think I managed it pretty well. And as I mentioned, it takes 21 people to dismantle the body of a pig. And it starts with a stabber and ends with the marking of the body, of its level of meat. There are almost half and half, men and women. Women mostly work on the easier parts of the killing line. And it is all very machine-based. And as I mentioned, pigs are put in gas chambers before they are killed by stabbing in the neck. Here is also an example of a slaughterhouse. Yes. And one thing also, I hope you can manage this image, is that they were very proud because recently they had got a new machine, which is the one that cuts the pigs into half. Before they had to do it with a gigantic knife, and many of the slaughterhouses in Estonia still have to do it with a gigantic knife to cut the pigs into half. So I think that we have this stabber position, which is rather violent, but think of a position of work which cuts the bodies into half constantly. So, yes. And what was really interesting also, that when I conducted these interviews, I did that at the slaughterhouse in their restroom, or not lounge. You can't have lounges in slaughterhouse, but sorry, the place where they have their break, or where they go and eat their sandwich. And I recorded these interviews, and it is really weird in that sense that during each of these interviews, you can hear the machine which cuts the pigs into half. So when I had to transcribe the interviews to write everything down, I was wondering 3 pigs per minute, and they were talking, and you can actually hear how the pigs were cut into half. Oh, and another really interesting story was that in this resting room, the radio was playing really silently. And this is just a weird way how life works. But when this one interviewee, who I first did an interview with, started talking about the calves, the baby calves, from the radio started playing Morrissey. And that was just yeah. Mm-hmm. So the summary of really simple, stupid points would be that they need to block the thoughts, is what helps them to do their work. None of them are happy with the conditions, nor with the salary. And they see the slaughterhouse as such, as an important part of the functioning of the world. And somebody has to do the job because everyone eats meat. And also, I remember one quote from the interview, which was something like that I asked about, how do you evaluate the effect or the impact that I sort of said a very broad, the green movement or the animal protection movement has had. And he said something that yes, I would also like for people to consume less meat, because then he would have to do less work, which is good for everyone. Yes. Yes. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and I wanted to ask about the director of the slaughterhouse you went to.
Was it difficult to arrange this kind of research with the authorities? Were they reluctant to let you in?
That's a good question. Actually, I should have mentioned it, but I forgot. It was really difficult. I wrote to, I think, was it 14 slaughterhouses or something like that, and they were the only one which replied back. The others said nothing. And also I did one thing, which is it is actually a question of ethics in the academic world. Since I have an animal rights background, I had been, before I did this research, I had been in the media with these questions. I didn't want to go there in a situation where they knew my background and their answers would have been a lot different, I am absolutely sure. So actually, I contacted from just my first name. Like, I was being really polite and nice and so on, and I only contacted with my first name. And I think the reason why the biggest slaughterhouse replied was just like PR and just like a sociology student wanting to do work research. Okay, yeah, we can do it. Although, which they also said is that no one can get into the slaughterhouse. Only like some Finnish investors can go there. And mostly even agricultural students, they don't bring them there anymore because they always get sick. And the slaughterhouse director was saying that, oh, I don't want to see them anymore. They always get sick. I don't want to bring them here. So like he was asking me that like, have you been to a slaughterhouse before? Or like, why are you so okay with it? And it was like, haha, I have looked at the footage for quite a long time. But I didn't tell that to him. I said that maybe I just have strong nerves. Yes.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you, you explain us very much about how the people working there are dealing with their work. My question is to you, how did you deal with doing your job there, interviewing these people? How did you deal with your feelings? And yeah, you see what I mean.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it was really difficult. When I live in the capital of Tallinn and the slaughterhouse is in another city, and when I had finished, it was the observation line. When I had finished it and I was in the bus driving back to Tallinn, my knees were shaking so hard I couldn't do anything about it. It's so, although I think I have strong nerves, I don't know why, but it still affects. There is nothing I can do about it. But how I dealt with it, I think since my first aim or my ambition or my motivation to do this research, it is so much connected with like my field in life. I was so motivated to use this information in order to, I want this field of work to gain more attention in the academia, to gain more attention in the university work. I think that maybe not exactly this research, but maybe if I expand it even more, can be used for the animals. And I think I was so motivated that I can, whatever happens, I can do it. I guess I had this in my mind. But thank you for the question, it's very nice. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a really fantastic presentation and congratulations on your research. Just a couple of things that might be helpful. One is, have you read Every 7 Seconds? I think that could be a very good book for you to look at. The other thing I was going to say is your hypothesis about why the calves were more difficult to kill, that's not the first idea that comes to my mind. The first idea that comes to my mind is that the workers became desensitised to particular species, and as soon as a new variable was introduced, a new species, they couldn't cope. And so it's not necessarily the calves are preferable to pigs or young to old. And so I just wonder if in the future, if you can stand it, if you get the opportunity, maybe have you thought about testing that hypothesis by going to a slaughterhouse that specialises in calves, and maybe they've had a shipment of pigs and was the same response? I mean, how much of it is, as you know, I'm very interested in visibility, and how much was it that particular types of animals are really nicer than others?
Yeah, that's absolutely a great development of the thought, absolutely. And actually, as I mentioned, the cow killing line was not working the day I had the observation there, but I would really like, I'd really like to see it, okay, but I would, actually, yes, because what even sounds a bit like twisted interesting is what the director of the slaughterhouse says, that there are like 7 different positions that only deal with the de-skinning of the cow and so on and so on. But definitely, since they were not used to having calves there. But what they did mention was that when I asked, but adult cows, they also have tears, but that is not the same thing. That is not the same thing. Yeah, so, but thank you.
Hi, I'm Evgeny. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think this is a very important topic to talk about, because we don't see the slaughterhouse workers in our real life, let's say. You said that you know that there are many slaughterhouse workers that stop working and go away and do something else. And I think it would be very interesting also to investigate the attitudes or the feelings of these people who worked in a slaughterhouse and do something else right now, because then they don't really need this blocking mechanisms anymore to continue to do this job. And I would be curious, for example, if they somehow even change their values, or they still block it because they don't want to think about it. I don't know if you were thinking about this in your research, but maybe you can say something. It would be very interesting, I think.
Yes, thank you, absolutely. I was also thinking about it when the director of the slaughterhouse mentioned it, and I sort of really politely tried if maybe he can recommend these people or give the context, but obviously he didn't want to. And I thought that this is very interesting material, because they have probably something more fulfilling information for the research to say, but I thought that for this particular paper, I only investigated those who are working there continuously. But definitely, but the thing is that they are probably very hard to reach, I can put maybe a ad in a magazine looking for ex-slaughterhouse workers, contact me, or something like that. But definitely, what were their reasons for leaving, and so on and so on. So, yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
It's not exactly a question. It's something I was thinking when I was watching that. In a strange way, I felt quite close to the slaughterhouse workers, and I think that there's something we have in common with them. Is that there are 2 groups in society of people who are keenly knowledgeable of what happens in the slaughterhouses. It's the slaughterhouse workers and animal rights activists. And I also feel in myself a mental block towards what happens in slaughterhouses. I know about it, and I think if I really realized what happens, it would be much harder for me. I think maybe we have a lot to learn in a certain way, psychologically, in one way or another, from slaughterhouse workers.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. Absolutely. When I was doing these interviews also, I didn't want to put myself in that sort of a position that, I don't know what would even be, that I am sort of more morally clean or something like that. Absolutely not. I find it very interesting to learn from these people, how do they manage with their work, because these are the attitudes that our society is built upon. And how can we be, as activists, how can we address something that we don't really know if we constantly block ourselves from it and we don't really know what we're up against in that sense. But yeah, that's a very good comment.
Thank you very much.